let's now look into the internal structure of the female. So we're already done with the external. We're already done with the analogy. We are now going into the what they call this as the internal structure of the female reproductive system. Now, going here, this is a drawing of that. So it's very familiar to us. Ito, di ba, very familiar. Pag-usapan natin na parang ano siya, yung usual na ganyan, as if it's a straight organ in the female reproductive tract. So this would be, of course, you're very familiar. This is the uterus, and this will be the fallopian tubes, and this will be the ovaries, and the other parts will be later discussed. So let's now look at the actual three-dimensional structure. So it's not simply looking like that, like a flat or straight system or organ system. It's actually, as we mentioned last time, it's actually bent. So you can see over here the female reproductive tract. So let's look at it in different perspectives. So you can see here, okay, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, you can see this is the uterus, this is the fallopian tube, and this is the ovary, and this is the vagina. So you will be noticing, if you're going to be looking at me over here, instead of being a straight system, it's actually bent. That is how the female reproductive tract will look like. So this will be the part of the vagina, and this will now be part of the uterus. So it's very interesting if it's shaped like that. Well, unlike what we usually think about the drawing that we are seeing here. So this is what it looks like when you have a cutaway section, and you have to really memorize this portion. Very important itong ating identification, and that is actually part of objective number 1. All right, so this is again the uterine tube, another name for the fallopian tube. This is the ovary, this is the uterus, and the vagina, and this is the external portion of the vulva. Okay, can I see a thumbs up if you're ready now to rock and roll and remember the female's internal structure? Alright, so let's start with the ovaries first. I'm going to give you the most important thing that you have to remember with this. So definitely the ovaries will be smaller compared with the testes. So this is oval shape, 2 to 3 centimeters in length only. And the most important thing you have to remember is that it produces the oocytes and the female sex hormones. Now, later on, when we proceed to 5.2, which is the module 5.2, the hormonal control of the female reproductive system, babalikan natin uli yung ovaries, because as the oocyte is developing inside the ovary, hormones are being released, and that actually changes the physical body of the female, particularly the uterus. We'll be looking at the parallel things that will happen between the ovaries and the uterus as we go to the hormonal control. So just remember right now, oocyte and female sex hormone. Now, in addition to that, there are other technical terms that you have to remember. These are just added information. May stoma, may cortex, may follicle, but you're going to be looking at that at higher biology. So, ang pinaka-importante dito is that oocyte and these sex hormones are produced, progesterone and the estrogen as well. So take note, progesterone is quite different from estrogen. Another terminology for estrogen is estradiol, but we usually use the word estrogen. Okay, now this would be the identification of the part. So we mentioned a while ago, this is now the ovary. So please do remember one important fact, and that is that the ovary is actually physically separated. There is a physical separation between the ovary and also the fallopian tubes. Have I mentioned about that last time? Can I see a thumbs up if I did mention about that physical separation and the implication of that? Thumbs up if I did, thumbs down if I did not mention about the physical separation. Okay, let me just wait for a few seconds. Probably delayed. Oh, hindi. Okay, very good. Now, that will actually lead to something that is, hindi naman siya a medical problem, a medical concern. Now, take note of this one. So what will happen here? We will be discussing 5.2, the whole process, but eventually, the egg cell or the ovum will be released. So if you can look at me in the video, over here. If this will be the ovary, eventually follicles will be developing inside of that, and when the follicle is mature, it will erupt. Hindi naman puputok yung ovary, hindi naman. Ibig sabihin nito, a portion of the surface of the ovary, there will be an eruption, and then the egg cell will go out. Now, this is where it is very important. Now, you will be noticing that the fallopian tube over here, there are finger-like structures. So later I'll show you the word. It's called fimbrae. Fimbre. So that is the important structure. And the fimbrae is actually very important. So I wrote it down in the chat box. The fimbrae actually finger-like projections that its only function is to draw out or to try to suck in or try to lead the egg cell to go towards the fallopian tube. And that is very, very important. And there is now a medical concern because if the fimbrae fails to do its job, then the egg cell will not be filtered through, will not be guided towards the inside of the fallopian tube. Saan pupunta ngayon ang egg cell if not inside of the fallopian tube? It will go into the yes, it is the abdomen. Now imagine this, it's very medically concerning because if the egg cell will go, if it will be successful to be filtered in by the fimbrae and will go into the fallopian tube, then the sperm cell will be meeting the egg cell inside the fallopian tube, and that is where fertilization will go. And then later on, it will move towards the uterus for implantation. However, if the egg cell was not able to go inside the fallopian tube and it is now going around the abdomen, the fluid-filled portion of the abdomen, then what will happen is the sperm cell will go there. That if there is fertilization, the fertilized egg will now implant itself somewhere in the abdomen. And that is medically concerning because supposedly the implanted fertilized egg should implant itself inside the uterus, where the uterus is expanding. However, the abdomen is not. So that is a problem. So anong tawag doon? Are you familiar with that? What kind of pregnancy? It is actually starting with letter E. Anong pregnancy ang tawag dyan? Okay, can I see your answer? Anong hula ninyo? Okay, another clue. EC. What is that? It is another clue. Yes, that's right. It is ectopic pregnancy. And unfortunately, when there is an ectopic pregnancy, it's a moral dilemma because you have to choose. Well, if you allow the embryo to develop into a baby, both the mother and the baby will die because the baby cannot develop inside the abdomen. Sometimes ectopic pregnancy happens wherein the egg was able or was successful in going inside the fallopian tube. However, upon fertilization, instead of implanting in the uterus, it implanted in the fallopian tube. It's also ectopic pregnancy, but the fallopian tube cannot expand, so it is going to erupt. It's going to explode. So that's the problem. So if the baby will not be removed, then the mother and both the mother and the baby will die. So this is a little ethical moral dilemma. So oftentimes when there's ectopic pregnancy, the baby is aborted. And that is called an emergency abortion. There's no choice. It's either both the mom or the baby dies, or you save the mom and the baby will be aborted. So, yun nga, medyo nakakalungkot lang. So, buti na lang, ang function ng fimbrae is to do that. So, talagang very vital ang mga function ng parts na ito. Alright, so let me finish up on this one. So, we're now done with the ovary, and I already introduced the fimbrae and also the fallopian tubes. Let's go. This is the cross-section of the ovary. You will be seeing circles. Ano itong mga circles na ito? These are the follicle. We'll talk about that later. And inside the follicle, you will see a very small circle, and that is what you call as the, ano tawag na sa mga circles na yan, you call that as the letter O. It is called the oocyte. Alright, so this is our egg cell. So when the egg cell or when the follicle itself is mature, then the egg cell will erupt from the surface and it will be going towards the fimbrae and also the fallopian tube. Alright, can you give me a clap reaction if so far you're able to follow what we are discussing? Very good, everyone. Let's just finish up with this. So after talking about the ovary, let's talk about the other ducts and passages. So the vagina, again, would be the muscular canal, about 10 centimeters long, entrance to reproductive tract, and also receive the penis during the process of sexual reproduction, and also the exit of the menses. And for childbirth. So let's remember three important characteristics or function of the vagina. Number one is exit of the menses and for childbirth, and also the reception or receiving the penis during the sexual reproduction. So that's it for the vagina. Now for the oviducts, another term for that is fallopian tubes. You have to remember that this will be the part that extends towards the ovary, as you have seen a while ago, and then it varies in length. And the most important thing is that they contain human hair. So it's very interesting that if you're going to look at the inside, the tube, inside tube of the fallopian tube, there are actually hairs moving like that. So what would be the function of this hair? Can I say in the chat box? Ano sa tingin niyo ang function ng hairs inside of the fallopian tube? It's moving like this. Okay, and it would be it's motion causing something to happen. Then, do you have an idea, class? Ano kaya mangyayari dito? What do you think? Tapos, syempre, pag nag-move din yung projections niya, not only does it collect, but it's also move the egg cell. So it will be tumbling down towards inside of your fallopian tube until it meets the sperm cell. So that is the function of the projection. So it's actually very interesting. Now you don't need to memorize about the isthmus, infundibulum, the fimbriae one is very important, and the ampulla. So hindi nyo na kailangan tandaan yan maliban sa fimbriae. Those are just parts of the what you call the fallopian tube. So going back here, this is the egg cell, the ovary that contains the follicles, which contains the egg cell. You have the fimbriae, finger-like projection to collect the egg cell, and then you have the fallopian tube over here, which contains the contains hair-like projections which help collect and also move the egg cell. All the other things you have to remember is this. This is the uterus, the very large structure here. And then you have here the cervix, which is the entrance into the uterus. And this will be the 10 centimeter long vagina. So these are the important things. Now the isthmus is simply a, it's like yung baywang, it's like the neck of the uterus, and then the fundus, etc. So you don't really need to memorize that. I'll leave it for the higher biology. Isthmus, ampulla, infundibulum. The important thing you have to remember are the finger-like projection called the fimbriae. All right. Now let's just finish up with this. This is the uterus, the muscular organ that allows implantation of the fertilized egg. Yeah, it is. During pregnancy, it increases in size. So it's very interesting that it's somehow as big as this, but later it will grow as big as a baby. So you can imagine that's how the uterus will be stretched. And actually, kaya minsan ng mga moms, nahihirapan sila huminga, it's because all their organs are actually being pushed upwards as the baby is developing. So they are pushed up a little bit. Kaya sometimes parang hinahapo ang mga moms. So really, they have to really take care of the mothers when they are carrying a pregnancy. So fundus and corpus, you just have to take note of that later on. But this is the most important about the uterus. Aside from it expands, aside from it is where implantation occurs, it is also containing the endometrium. The endometrium is very important because this is the one that thickens in order to prepare for implantation of the baby. Why does it thicken? It's because it is being affected by the sex hormones. In addition to that, blood vessels are being formed here. So para lang mapabilis sa discussion, why blood vessels? Because blood vessels are very important when the fertilized egg implants, then the blood vessel will connect with the fertilized egg and become an embryo. Those blood vessels will later become the, anong tawag doon sa nakadikit sa puso, you call that as the umbilical cord. So it's now providing the food, providing the nutrition for the baby. Okay, can I say a heart reaction if you get that portion about the uterus? Okay, very good. Kaya very important siya. Ngayon, paano kung walang implantation? Paano kung hindi, walang fertilized egg? So what will happen here is that, di ba, makapal yung endometrium. The endometrium, because of the absence of the fertilized egg implanting, will now be signaled because of the absence to become thinner. And how does the endometrium become thinner? It actually slows off. When it slows off, it removes itself, natatanggal siya. So this means maraming blood vessels yan. Kung maraming blood vessels at natatanggal siya, what is actually being produced? Yan, you call that as letter M. Para mapabilis tayo, yes, that's right, it is the menstruation. So, the monthly period of the females are actually the endometrium becoming thinner because the blood vessels are actually being forcefully removed. We'll talk about the hormonal control of that a little bit later. So, ano nangyayari dito? So, it's very interesting that bakit cycle, bakit monthly? It's because of the major objective of the female body to prepare itself for possible pregnancy. So, nangyayari, the uterus, the endometrial lining decreases, nag-i-increase sa kanyang size because when the embryo or when the fertilized egg implants, it is now prepared with the blood vessels to provide nutrition to the developing embryo. However, pag walang fertilized egg, then it will just remove itself kasi sayang yung preparation, sayang yung tuloy-tuloy na usage of materials. So, mangyayari ay matatanggal siya and then it will be removed as menstruation. Alright, let's finish up. We have the cervix, which is the neck of the uterus that opens the vagina. And this provides mucus secretion. And take note, it facilitates sperm movement through the tract. Usually the cervix will be closed, but during the process or during the time of ovulation, usually at the 14th day, around that time, na very fertile na female, the cervix would open up, produce mucus, kasi we already know that sperm cells, in order to move, needs a medium. And what is that medium? It's the mucus. The mucus coming from the cervix will help facilitate the movement of the sperm cell inside the uterus and then eventually helping it go towards the fallopian tube. Kaya nakakatulong ang cervix na iyan. Okay, can you see a thumbs up if you got that portion, everyone? Can you see that? Alright, so remember na lamang yung mga keywords that I am mentioning. Alright, so this would be this is the uterus and this is the cervix. You can see here the neck and this is the entrance towards the cervix. It will be later producing the mucus to facilitate and help the sperm cell to swim towards the inside of the female reproductive tract. Alright, we'll now go to the last portion of our discussion and this is the identification. So you already know this one. This is the rectum and this is portion. This one is the uterus. So, nakaganon yung uterus, ano? So, this is the vagina, this is the cervix, and this is the uterus. In addition to that, this portion is called the baliktad siya. Okay, the ovary is the whitish portion here, and this would be the fallopian tube and the fimbriae here. This is the bladder. This is the G-spot. This is the clitoris, which is containing sensitive nerve endings for arousal. And those were the important things that you have to do.